each other.
Right.
Okay. So there are certain things that we can do. We can, if you work well together and invest, for example, invest in those things that produce productivity, that actually raise our incomes and raise our living standards and dealing with the debt better. So for example, education, okay, spending in education. As you know, my wife, and particularly, and me too, as I tag along, is dealing with the educational disparities in the state of Connecticut, which are terrible. I'm just going to touch on that for a minute. Connecticut is one of the richest states in the country. 22% of the high school students are either disengaged or disconnected. Disengaged means they're failing, their absentee rate is greater than 25%, they're failing classes. Disengaged means they don't go to school, so they don't know where they are. 1 in every 5, the education system isn't working. As a result, what happens? Who is their community and what is their job? Their community is the gangs, literally gangs with shootings, and the incomes come from crime. And that produces problems for the society. And it also produces high incarceration rates and so on. So there's no better investment than a terrific investment in education or infrastructure. We've let our infrastructure collapse. I think it's my generation. Unfortunately, it's my generation, maybe to some extent your generation. When my parents existed, they went through depression and war, and they came out and they were called the greatest generation by Tom Brokaw. In my generation, it's leaving them with big debts and a broken down infrastructure and a substantially suboptimal education system. Do you know that today, average education for Americans in testing scores put us in the bottom third of all developed countries? And that social mobility rate is one of the worst in the developed world. We always thought that there was opportunity and you could change. So those things have got to be fixed. They can be fixed. But the worst thing is, let's not fight with each other. Let's not. In a combination, yes, it's a combination of taxes and it's a combination, but the key is not where you get the money. The key is what you do to invest in the future to create a better, more productive result of people working well together. So for me, I believe that we need a very strong middle. Okay, you need very strong bipartisanship. I think that we have a problem because the two political parties have among them more also extremists. And in order to get elected in either party, you've got to be fairly extremist. And what you need is a strong middle in order to be able to have a mandate and follow that through. But in any case, how we are with each other is going to be the biggest thing. And that's not only domestically, it's internationally. Let's not go to war, okay? But you're right, wars typically last a few years. Let's even be clear about that, because that's a very, very scary thought. And it could be, modern warfare will be much more advanced than the last time we had a world war.
And also could be technological warfare, as you said, first, before it's even the military side, which could change.
So it's a very scary. The capacity of humans to destroy each other has never been greater. But at the same time, if we don't go to that warfare and you work through, then there's a heck of a competition, and then the systems will compete. And from that competition will come productivity and all those things. So it all comes down to how we are with each other. We are at a juncture. So that's the collective. For the individual, in the book, I talk about, how to protect oneself in investing, how do you have resources? How do you have enough resources? And not only with that enough resources, how do you make sure that you're protected well and all of that. So the book is...
I want to touch base with you on that as well. I want to ask one question though before. You've been quoted talking about we could be the closest to a civil war we've ever been before. And people don't see that as a possibility. A lot of people don't. Other people just overreact. But, it'd be great for people to understand for 2 seconds the history of the Soviet Union and what happened, the history in China, what happened, that these civil wars are sometimes one of the things that occurs. And why do they occur? Let's touch on that. And then let's talk about inflation for a second, if we can, where we are, Ukraine, and then maybe wrap up with the individual and what they can do financially as well as personally, and on the relationship side of things, like you just talked about the collective. So could you touch on, perhaps a little bit of what's happened with civil wars in the past. Why have you said this in the past? And again, I think you've given us the solution. We have to find the middle, some strong leaders in the middle. I remember I went worked with President Clinton, and I crossed the street on the same day and went to work with the Speaker of the House, Gingrich, on the same day. Today, that would be totally impossible. And they both knew I was doing it because I was working to help each one do something well. So if they were doing something together, they'd fight like hell and then go have a beer together. But today, talking to the other side is like radioactive. So tell us a little about what creates that, not to create fear, but to understand that it has happened historically. It's another way things occur, why we want to treat each other better. And then let's talk a little bit about where we are right now with Ukraine and Russia, since you're talking about war and sanctions and where inflation is.
Okay. Yeah. What happens is, and you could see it in the French Revolution. They call them revolution, but they're civil wars. The French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Civil War, the Cuban Civil War, the many cases. Hitler, Europe, and fascism and communism and all of those types of things. All of those happen when you get to the stage where there's populism and you lose the middle. In other words, you get those on each side. When the causes that they are behind is more important to them than the system is in jeopardy. And when they become fighters, okay? And so that is not a means. They don't get together. They don't say, now, how do we make this work for both of us? How do we compromise? The middle is perceived as weak, and everybody has to choose. In the French Revolution, there was a middle. A lot of people said we need change and we need to bring those about in the middle. They were, guillotined and so on. You have to get on one side or the other, and you're forced to. Otherwise, you're perceived as weak. And so it's self-reinforcing. You know that in certain relationships, you can get beyond talking. You can get to the fact that, no, I'm going to hurt you, like the Supreme Court decisions could be. In other words, I will not obey. And when you say I will not obey, you're in a power, make me kind of situation. And that's a dangerous situation. Now, it could be, I think we're seeing the movement to different states along those lines, because of I want to be with more the people I want to be with who have similar values and also will deal with me economically the way I want. Each makes those choices. That causes, to some extent, a hollowing out when you go from let's say a New York or a California to a Florida to a Texas.